There's a jar in a croft kitchen on the Isle of Skye that has sat untouched since 1957. Its contents do not move, do not bubble, do not show any sign of life at all. But when the last candle is snuffed and the hearth cools to ash, the jar knows something the waking world does not. The jar is made of salt-glazed stoneware, the color of peat smoke and lichen. Its lid is sealed with wax as old as the coronation of a queen who is now memory. It weighs exactly what it weighed the day it was filled. 3 pounds. 7 ounces of something that could be flour paste or bread starter, or the last breath of a grandmother who did not believe in refrigeration. The family who lives here now does not open it. They do not remember what is inside. They only know the jar sits on the shelf above the range, and that their grandmother warned them once never to break the wax. At night, when the kitchen is dark and the wind presses against the window glass, the air around the jar changes. It does not hum. It does not glow. But if you stood close enough, if you pressed your cheek against the cool stoneware, you would feel a warmth that has no source, a warmth thin as a held breath, a warmth that smells faintly of rye and sour apples and something older, like the dust of a granary that has not seen sunlight in a century. This is the yeast that wakes when the kitchen sleeps. All over the world there are jars like this one. In a pantry, in a farmhouse, in the Jura Mountains, a crock of sourdough starter has been fed and neglected in alternating cycles for 3 generations. The family who owns it believes the starter has a temper. It rises best when the baker is calm. It sulks when the kitchen is filled with argument. In a root cellar in a small Polish village, a bottle of fermented honey sits sealed with a wooden stopper wrapped in linen. The honey has been fermenting since 1942. The woman who buried it did not survive the war, but the yeast she captured from the apple orchard behind her cottage did. It still lives, dormant and patient, waiting for sugar and water in the warmth of a hand that remembers. The science of this is quiet and strange. When a starter or a ferment goes dormant, when it is sealed cold and fed nothing for years, the yeast cells enter a state called anhydrobiosis. They dry out. They shrink. Their cell membranes crystallize into a glass-like state that stops all metabolic activity. They become, for all practical purposes, dead. Except they are not. Archaeologists have rehydrated yeast from a 4,000-year-old Egyptian bread pot and watched it wake. They have revived dormant lactic acid bacteria from a Roman amphora of wine that had not seen liquid in 2 millennia. The yeast did not ask for permission. It simply remembered how to live. This is the first secret the jar holds. Life does not stop. It waits. Think of the last time you opened a jar you had forgotten in the back of your own pantry. Did you pause to wonder what was still alive in there? If that moment stirred something in you, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story of a vessel that outlived its keeper. And in the comments, tell me what you keep at the back of your shelf. The thing you have not opened in years, but cannot bring yourself to throw away. In the 19th century, a baker in a small town in the Austrian Alps kept a rye starter that his family claimed had been passed down for 7 generations. The starter was kept in a wooden barrel lined with pitch, and it was never washed. When the baker died, his daughter did not know what to do with it. She sealed the barrel with wax and put it in the attic. The barrel sat there for 60 years. When a great-grandson found it, he did not dare open it inside the house. He carried it to the garden, broke the seal, and tipped the barrel onto the grass. What came out was not dust. It was a paste the color of old bone, and when he added water and rye flour to a pinch of it, it bubbled within hours. The starter had survived 3 wars, 2 famines, and the complete collapse of the family that had fed it for 2 centuries. It did not bear a grudge. It just woke up. There is a scientific name for this patience. It is called microbial resurrection, and it describes the ability of dormant cells to return to active metabolism after years or centuries of suspended animation. The longest recorded revival is a strain of halophilic archaea extracted from a salt crystal estimated to be 250 million years old. It woke up, grew, and divided in a petri dish in a laboratory in Maryland. The yeast in a forgotten sourdough jar is not quite that ancient, but the principle is the same. It is counting time differently than you are. The jar on the Isle of Skye has been still for 68 years. But if you broke the wax, added lukewarm water and a handful of barley flour, and left it by the fire overnight, you would find by morning that the surface had cracked into a lacework of small bubbles. The smell would be sharp and alive. Vinegar, and something floral, like a meadow after rain. The yeast would remember its job. This is the second secret. The jar is not dead. It is listening for the footstep of someone who remembers to feed it. If you are the kind of person who feels the weight of that, who has a jar of your own, or who longs to be one of the hands that remembers, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe because these stories are not about the past. They are about what is still waiting for you in your own kitchen. And in the comments, tell me the name of the person whose hands you would want to remember if your own starter survived them. In a village in the mountains of Honshu, a family keeps a fermentation crock that has been active for over 100 years. The crock is stored in a wooden box lined with cedar, and it is only opened twice a year. Once in spring to add brine and vegetables, once in autumn to harvest the fermented pickles. The rest of the year, the lid stays closed. The family says the crock must never be left alone for more than 12 months, or the fermentation spirit will grow lonely and stop. This is not superstition. It is ecology. The lactic acid bacteria and yeast that live in a continuous ferment need periodic feeding to maintain their population. If left too long without fresh substrate, the colony collapses. But collapse is not death necessarily. The resilient cells enter dormancy and they wait. Somewhere, in a kitchen in a city you have passed through, there is a jar of starter that was last fed on the day a marriage ended, or a child left home, or a war began. The person who fed it stopped. The jar went into the back of the refrigerator, behind jarred sauces and pickled things that were bought, not made. The starter sat in the cold and darkened. But if you poured off the dark liquid that pooled on top, that grayish, sharp-smelling layer that some people call hooch, and some people call the yeast's tears, and fed it fresh flour and water, it would wake. It might take 3 feedings. It might take 5. But the bubbles would return. The smell would turn sweet again. The colony would remember. The third secret is the most difficult to say aloud. The jar does not need you the way you think. It can live without you. It has lived without you before. But when you feed it, you become part of its memory. The yeast records the temperature of your kitchen, the rhythm of your hands, the humidity of the season you opened it in. It does not forget. Every fermentation is a lineage, and you are the latest ancestor in a chain that does not care about your name. In the croft on sky, the old jar settles into its place on the shelf. The wax holds. The dust accumulates. The family sleeps. And when the candle dies, when no one is watching, the yeast inside the jar stirs in its long, slow dream. It dreams of the hands that mixed it. It dreams of the kiln where the jar was fired. It dreams of the day someone will crack the wax and say, "I wonder if it is still alive." It is. It was. It will be. If you ever find a jar you do not recognize at the back of a pantry, sealed and forgotten, do not throw it away. Do not open it immediately. Let your palm rest on its shoulder first. Feel for the warmth that has no source. Listen for the whisper of something that has been waiting longer than you have been alive. It has a story worth feeding. Before you go, before this jar returns to its dream behind the screen, subscribe. Subscribe so that when this channel leaves a jar of its own stories on the shelf, you will be here to crack the wax. And in the comments, type the word yeast, just that one word, as a marker that you were here, that you heard it, that you are now part of the chain.